Hello, welcome to our first book review. I've got 3 books here. First one being Outlive by Dr Peter Attia. The second one, Glucose Revolution by Jessie Inchauspé. And the third one, Ultra Processed People by Chris van Tulleken. So I'm going to start with Outlive, then go to the glucose, then go to the ultra processed people. So this was the order I've read them in. So Outlive by Dr Peter Attia is a book about not necessarily living longer, but about how you're going to spend the last 10 plus years of your life and how you want to spend it. How do you see yourself spending it, and what do you need to do now to enable that to happen? So it can be quite a frightening book about death, because it looks at the ways we're likely to die, as we're all going to die, whether it's dementia, cancer, heart problems, etc. So in summary, the book is about looking at where you are currently. So that might mean having lots of tests. You might already know certain things. There might be certain genetics, but he questions genetics as well. As a lot of things we assume are genetic, we can actually change. But as many tests, he runs a clinic. So if you were to go and see him, you'd go in and have tests for absolutely everything. Scans, tests, calcium scans, cholesterol, uric acid, lots of protein scans, DEXA scans, biopsies, colonoscopies, as many scans as you can think of, all the bloods, to get a baseline and then to see if there's any problems or potential problems. It's about a risk kind of analysis to see what chances there are of you developing one of the 4 main killers, and then seeing if you can do anything about it. So some of the chapters, headlines, which might give you a bit more of an idea about how the book is put together. He looks at how we've evolved as humans and how medicine has evolved, and he likes to look at it as medicine 2.0 where we are now, but moving towards medicine 3.0. So at the moment it's all about treating disease, problems, fixing things. A lot of the time when it's a bit too late, a lot of the time we have these tests and measures and go, oh no, you're okay, you're within range, don't worry about it now, let's retest you in 10 years, by which time you may have gone into the problem zone, and then they start to treat it with drugs. So this is about spotting things much earlier and doing something, being proactive. He's a big fan of exercise. So I think a lot of us really underestimate how much effort it is when we're in our later years to be able to do the most simple things, carrying stuff, traveling, getting up and down off the floor. He really pushes a multitude of exercise, so like a decathlon, to be not just focusing on running, for example, or just swimming. He encourages as wide variety as possible of exercise, and he's a real fan of strength training. He obviously looks at food and what food is best for you, and this is what kind of led us into the Zoe science and nutrition that we've spent a lot of time with and are still working with, and we've YouTubed and blogged about. He's also a big fan of sleep, and near the end of the book he comes back around to his emotional health and his own personal story, which he relates to throughout the book, about his emotional health and how much he ignored that or wasn't aware of it, and how much that was actually impacting all his relationships and his physical health. And so he kind of finishes on that note, and the risks of ignoring the emotional health. So maybe that's quite a short summary. I've highlighted a few things here with my tabs on fructose, VO2 max, which I look at in my Garmin video. He's a big fan of as a measure of fitness, and metabolism. There's cholesterol, there's lots of things. It's a big read, it's a big book. There's lots of stories and examples of people's health, and kind of light bulb moments for him as he moved throughout his practice and his career. So, big book, it's a brilliant read. Well worth it if you've got the time. Outlive by Dr Peter Attia. So, the second book, The Glucose Revolution, the life-changing power of balancing your blood sugar. So after Outlive, we started Zoe, which was the insulin patches, to see how we're reacting, how our blood sugar's reacting to certain foods, different foods. And the main reason of that was to get personalised food scores. It wasn't just our blood sugar, it was our blood fat. And the personalised food scores helped us to choose our foods. What this does is very similar to the Zoe approach, and they do mention Zoe here as well, because what this lady did was actually start measuring her glucose reactions to different foods at different times of the day in different orders. And so this is kind of Zoe going into slightly more focus on real specifics in terms of flattening your curves and different ways you can do that, because it does differ for everyone. There are loads and loads of examples in here of which foods cause the spikes, which order cause different spikes. So if you're eating, they recommend to eat fibre, then your protein and your fats, and then your carbs. So the order in which you can eat your foods can make a big difference to flattening your curves. So it looks at what is glucose, goes on to look at why are glucose spikes harmful, and then how to flatten the curves. And then it goes into some recipes at the back, some great recipes, quite a few actually, breakfast, lunch and dinner. How to flatten the curves is a quite interesting one. They're kind of called hacks. I'll just read through those. There's 10 main hacks that they go into in quite a bit of detail. I'll read the headers. Eat foods in the right order. So that's what I was mentioning: fibre, protein and fats, and then carbs. Add a green starter to all your meals. So that would be a salad maybe, or green soup. Stop counting calories. Very interesting, because they go into details where you can eat the same amount of calories in a different order, which can affect your weight gain loss. Flatten your breakfast curve. Now there's lots of talk about the typical breakfast in the West of orange juice and cereal and toast and marmalade, for example, which they really say is completely bad because it's just sugar, sugar, sugar. They recommend savoury breakfast, so try and almost make your breakfast like a lunch. So that might mean eggs or spinach, or nuts, bit of yogurt, dairy, whatever your lifestyle choices are. Try and make it a bit more savoury, a bit more protein, a bit more fat, rather than just carbs with sugar, sugar, sugar. Have any type of sugar you like, they're all the same. So this myth that honey is better for you than white sugar sugar is sugar. There may be some benefits to eating a raw honeycomb in the jungle if you find it somewhere, like some people do, but there's a lot more benefits to that than eating honey out of a jar, because a lot of honey you find is actually very highly processed as well as a lot of the bees. A lot of it's very commercial, industrial. Bees are just fed on sugar syrup rather than being natural. Pick dessert over a sweet snack. So this was one big, probably one of the main things I got from this book. I was a big fan of afternoon tea and cake or biscuits, where I'd have had my lunch, let's say at 12:30, 3:30 comes around, I'm looking for my cake, and I just think, that's fine. I'll go for a run, or I'm not necessarily overweight, but this is saying, don't do that, because you'll just have another spike and then a bigger crash. So if you're going to have the cake or something sweet, have it as dessert, so have it after your main meal rather than as a separate meal by itself. Reach for the vinegar before you eat. This is a little hack. If you, I don't think it's recommending it for all meals, but if you are in a situation where you know you're going to have something and you might have a spike, saying a little bit of vinegar, whichever one it is, I think apple cider, or anyway, dilute it in a big glass of water and drink through a straw so you're not getting all the vinegar on your teeth. Can help flatten your curve. If you have to snack, try and go savoury. So again, that's a bit self-explanatory. Hack number 8, after you eat, move. So if you have your lunch or your snack or whatever, if you can, go for a walk. 20-minute brisk walk, doesn't have to be a run, or do some squats or something accessible to where you are, so that you're using the sugar rather than allowing it to go into storage. And put some clothes on your carbs. So that means if you're going to have some bread, put some butter on it, or some oil, or some nut butter. So put some clothes on your carbs. So that's a few of the hacks. That's probably enough on the book. Very good book, very enlightening, and great to give you some just some more options in how to structure your food and your diet and your day to flatten those curves. Okay. So third book, The Ultra Processed People, and it's got a nice picture of a loaf of brown bread on the front. Now the main reason behind that is that a lot of us will see a loaf of brown bread, seeded in this case, because that was his go-to. I think it was a well-known brand of brown bread that makes a seeded version. That was his go-to, and he thought, oh, it's healthy because it's brown bread, seeded. But ultimately it was a UPF because it's got tons of ingredients in it that are not necessary. So, an amazing book, lots of insights into the industry and how it works and why we've ended up where we are with most of our foods on the shelves being UPF, which is really sad. So this will encourage us to cook even more from scratch. Anything you look at, we've started looking at the ingredients labels a lot more anyway with all the food we consume, and we have our Zoe app where we can scan food and barcodes, and they'll rate it, rank it and score it on one of their scoring factors is it ultra processed, because it will analyze all the ingredients. So it looks at lots of ingredients that are basically not recognizable as store cupboard, you wouldn't have in your kitchen. So just some on a list I've got here: maltodextrin, monosodium glutamate, the famous MSG that finds its way into lots of stuff, which there's been big waves of media coverage on these things, but they quieten down, and this stuff is still around. It's in lots of things. Disodium isonate, disodium glutamate, sodium caseinate, modified food starch, monoglyceride, diglyceride, and all the inverted corn syrups, palm oils, anything that you don't know what it is in there to make it taste more appealing. The fat, the salt, the way it behaves in the mouth, on the tongue, to make it addictive. And there's a few quotes in here that are amazing about us chasing nutrition, where we eat this ultra processed food and we keep eating it because we're chasing nutrition that we're not getting, and that's why it becomes almost addictive. I'll read another couple of quotes from it. Just 12 plants and 5 animals make up 75% of all the food that's eaten or thrown away, it says. 12 plants, and we're encouraged to eat at least 30 plants a week. There is far less energy in our food than it takes to make it. So that looks at the whole industrial process of growing food, for example, to feed animals, and growing food and then ultra processing it in all these big factories. 80% of the world's farmland is used to graze animals or produce animal feed. And the last one I'll look at is the British Nutrition Foundation is funded by all the companies that produce ultra-processed food, including Coca-Cola, Pepsi, all the big food groups. They fund the British Nutrition Foundation that's giving out advice on how we should eat. So lots of foods feature in it as, the ultimate bad stuff like Pringles and Greggs sausage rolls from Iceland, they said contained over 40 ingredients. All the, the drinks, all the fake sugar, the aspartame and all that in soft drinks. It looks at companies like Nestle and stuff they've done by taking this huge ship over into this, I think it's South America, somewhere near the Amazon, where they just sailed the ship in full of all their products, pretending they were doing a good thing, getting all these villagers addicted to Kit Kats and terrible stuff. Call out a few big names, big companies and their products, and the stories about how these big companies are trying to get their products through onto the market. In the US, a lot of companies pretty much self-regulate. There is the Food and Drug Administration, but the companies are sort of pretty much allowed to just say and tell the Food and Drug Administration that their products are safe. And the stories that they go into about how horrific some of the the production methods are behind some of the basics that find their way into all of our foods is horrific. It calls out the normal Coke and Pepsi. It calls out the Pringles, but even the products like a loaf of bread that have become ultra processed. It calls out even companies like Pret a Manger, who have all this lovely food, lovely marketing, all fresh natural ingredients. But I was actually in one the other day, and I was scanning the sandwiches, and no matter what sandwich it was, whether it was vegan, veggie or meat or whatever, they were scoring like 20 in the 20. This is out of 100, my Zoe score, 25. I couldn't even get a sandwich higher than 30. And they look really nice, they look really fresh, and pretty much it's the bread that that really kills the score. Their bread they use is pretty much, you know, ultra processed like this. It's got all the additives, which is pretty shocking. And he contacts these companies, and they just, you know, they're probably owned by private equity groups that just want to make money. So why would they use real bread that costs a bit more in their sandwiches? It looks at the whole chain, the whole cycle of the UPF and the disease it causes. It's responsible for so much of the disease and obesity that's all on the increase. And it looks at some of these companies that are producing the UPF are also involved in then trying to cure the diseases that they're creating. So we've got the ultra processed food being fed to everyone, making a huge amount of money, and then on the other end we've got the drug companies curing the disease, and they're all making a huge amount of money as well. So fascinating. It's been out for a couple of years actually. Eye-popping and enlightening. Some of the quotes on the back: incendiary and infuriating. This book is a diet grenade and bold and brutal truth about how we are fed deadly delights by very greedy, evil giants. So it might change the way you look at food for the better. That's the end of that book, and that's the end of these three. They're all here at WKD Yoga in our library if you do attend here. So I've read them, so feel free to come and borrow them at any time.